most intense, thrilling, electrifying sport on the planet. Mixed martial arts. You've been looking for the definitive podcast to call your new home to hear everything about it. The search is over. This is the MMAnomaly Show. No filter. Bringing you the hottest MMA breakdowns straight from the heart of the octagon. This show is all about MMA breakdowns. For fans, by fans. We're talking UFC, MMA, and the occasional big boxing match. We'll bring our unique take on how these fights are going to play out and who we think are the best bets. Welcome to the MMAnomaly Show. No filter. And now your hosts, Olin, a.k.a. MMAnomaly, and Emiliano, a.k.a. Jive Turkey Nano.
What is up, fight fans? Welcome back to another episode of the MMAnomaly Show. No filter. You heard the man. I'm your host, Olin, a.k.a. MMAnomaly. And with me, as usual, is the co-host with the most, Jive Turkey Nano. How we doing?
We are doing great. We're gobbling away. We're just chucking and jiving, man, on this fine Monday morning after a fantastic Thanksgiving weekend. Very thankful. Ate a lot of food. Like I told you on a personal note, I was a little bit sick, but after that, didn't let that slow us down, man. We still made time to enjoy the weekend, and now we're off to a great start, and excited to have a little bit of a unique episode here today for you listeners. So I'm excited, man. Ready to jump on in.
With that being said, I'm super stoked about it too, man. It is a little bit of a unique episode, folks. You heard the man. We're not going to be breaking down this weekend's UFC fights. Why, you ask? Well, there wasn't any. We didn't have any UFC fights this weekend. So, it happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but, when it does, we have to take a step back and just, take witness, bear witness, and see what else there is to entertain our, skilled violence fan minds. So, that's what we did, folks. We scoured the net and we looked up to see what we could find to talk about for this Monday episode. And it ended up landing on none other than the Professional Fighters League, aka the PFL. Now, before we jump into it, got a shout out to those in the chat that are here supporting us. What up, Tico Tech? Love seeing you here. He says, what up, boys? And we say, what up right back, my guy.
Was good, brother. Good to see you. Let's go.
So we're going to be breaking into the PFL here. We're not going to go over all of the undercard. I did have one specific fight that I wanted to talk about on this undercard, though. Of course, you probably already can guess what it is, right? Or who it is, rather. I'm talking about the ex-football player turned MMA fighter who happens to be a direct descendant of the late, great Muhammad Ali, the one, the only. We're talking about Biagio Ali Walsh. This man has really started to make a name for himself, if I'm being honest. But when it comes to amateur mixed martial arts, this man is on television fighting amateur, which is already like, what? Already give the man his roses for that. But that being said, he lost his very first amateur fight to a young man named Devin Rothwell. He lost in the second round, just 2 minutes and 6 seconds in, via rear naked choke submission. Now, fast forward a handful of years, and when I say a handful of years, I mean just one, because since then, mind you, that was just back in June of 2022, the young man has strung together not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 amateur wins in a row after losing his first amateur fight. Mind you, every single one of those has gone less than 2 full rounds and has finished via TKO or KO. The first 4 after that first loss were first round finishes. Very, very quick finishes, might I add. And the man has dynamite his hands. He doesn't have the finesse of his grandfather, Muhammad Ali, but the man, he's got it. And it was no different going in here against Joel Lopez in the PFL here to open up, or not to open up, but on the undercard before these championship bouts that we had in the PFL. I thought it was a phenomenal win for him, but I do have to address the elephant in the room. Before I do that, though, don't want to steamroll through this entire episode. Nano, what were your thoughts, or rather, what are your thoughts on the young Ali?
I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, and I'll throw my quick 2 cents in here because you're on a heater, man. I love when you're steamrolling. But Biagio, man, we got to remember the name here, Biagio Ali Walsh. I mean, not only because he is an Ali, he's going to make a name for himself here, Biagio Ali Walsh, right? And like you said, I mean, Grandpa is the greatest of all time, the GOAT, literally. We're talking about Muhammad Ali here. So in terms of the lineage, in terms of the motivation, in terms of having the right people around you, and having that deep why, I mean, it's literally in his blood. So you got to already give him the benefit of the doubt there. Being that he is a 6'1", or he's 6'1", excuse me, being 5'10" at that lightweight division, 155, rangy, and he uses that range really, really well. In terms of being able to throw the combinations, string them together. Obviously, we knew that, again, he's an Ali. The boxing pedigree was going to be on par. But what you said earlier, what makes him special is he does have that knockout capability. It's one thing to be able to pepper you. One thing, he's going to come in with the fundamentals, but he's got that special touch that tends to put people out. And it's maybe it's his technique. Maybe it's just some of that God-given capabilities. But what you do notice is sharp punches that are thrown. He's a rangy fighter in the lightweight division. And he's going to be a problem at just 25 years old, just scratching the surface. Again, this is mixed martial arts, so I'm great to see him already getting those 7 amateur fights under his belt, getting more experience. The more the merrier, and PFL is a great place to continue to get that experience in this season style formatting where you really, if you're healthy, you're going to be active, and there's a motivation to continue on, and there's obviously that big payday. I don't know if that's exactly why he's doing it, but regardless, dude's super talented. And this kid Biagio, man, I think he's going to be making a name for himself here. So I'll give the mic back to you, brother. But yeah, he had a great performance, and this is someone I think we'll be talking about much more often here in the upcoming year to come. Oh, can you hear me?
There we go. Sorry about that. Amateur hour here, folks. No, so this guy is absolutely impressive. I agree with everything you said. Picking up what you're putting down 100% here. Now, the elephant in the room that I was saying we have to address here is he's still fighting amateurs, and he's still fighting as an amateur himself. The man needs to be promoted, or rather step up himself to professional fighting. He's fighting for a promotion called the Professional Fighters League. Okay, and he's an amateur, and he's fighting amateurs on preliminary cards of their biggest card of the year. Come on, like that's an elephant that I had to address here, folks. I mean, again, we call it the No Filter Show because there's no filter here, right? Like we're not here to sugarcoat everything for you, because that's gonna make you just more unhappy in the end. You're gonna have a belly ache. You're gonna look at yourself in the mirror and be like, why'd they sugarcoat everything? Anyways. Biagio Ali Walsh, he is a beast. Now, you mentioned something that stood out to me for sure. Is it technique? Is it God-given grit and just like strength? He has that touch. I think it's a bit of both. In this last one, he specifically just like did a duck roll, like classic, but he threw and just hit with like the side of his hand, inside of his hand, splat. And he nailed his opponent so hard, he made his opponent literally just like drop guard and turn around like, I don't want to be here. And then he, of course, ate a follow-up left for his troubles from behind. So not only does he put people away or put people to sleep, but the people that he's not able to put to sleep, from what I've seen, he makes quit. So I'd like to see what happens when he's faced with someone that doesn't quit, like a Shane Burgos. I know that's way getting ahead of ourselves here, but Shane doesn't have a ton of years left. He's under the PFL roster. We want to make use of that name. You want to build Biagio Ali Walsh. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to give him somebody on the lower tier of the PFL lightweight rankings and let him work himself into the actual $1 million prize pool here.
I love that, brother. Yeah, I mean, it'd be a great litmus test for him. Again, in terms of mixed martial arts and the rule set here in PFL, which I do think we're going to touch on a little bit later, because I did find some things unique that I didn't realize about PFL. But all things considered, you still got to have a good ground game. Not going to point any of these. But you still have to have a good ground game. You still have to be able to mix it up. And Shane Burgos does a great job of mixing it up. I think if it were just a striking match, boy, that is fun for the fight fans out there in the world. And that would be a big statement for the PFL. I almost want to throw an asterisk in there if Shane Burgos decides to sit there and stand for 15 minutes or 25 minutes, however long the event is, because he does have a great, well-rounded game, and we just don't know where Biagio is at. You know, how much grappling has he gotten done? Where is he at on the jiu-jitsu scale? Or is he a wrestler background? I mean, really, I don't know much else other than just I'm very confident he has that boxing pedigree. But what other disciplines does he have? And does he have an answer for those types of tests? So that would be a fun one. I wouldn't be mad with that. And I think the thing is, or the reality is, with the PFL and where you're at, with the momentum, with this kind of announcement, you got to make some splashy fights, some splashy announcements. And this is a way to do it right here for sure.
100% agree with that. So, I mean, that's it for me. If we're talking about kind of the undercard here, I don't think we need to go over any of the rest of the ones on this undercard. Obviously, you know, we had the Jesus Pinedo coming in against Gabriel Braga for the title fight there. Jesus Pinedo defeated him via TKO in round 3, just 58 seconds in. I think that's the most we really need to talk about that fight. It was kind of a knock him out, drag out fight until that knockout. And people are here for the juice, right? People are here for the solid, like the main card fights here. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. We know people want to hear about Crash Bandicoot himself, aka Blonde Brunson. So, and of course I call him Crash Bandicoot because look at the way he's built. He's genuinely built literally like Crash Bandicoot. So that being said, he came in here against Ray Cooper III, who looked rough on the scales, and he looked rough in the circle there in the cage. Man, it was tough to see. It was tough to witness. It was tough to watch. And of course, Derek Brunson got it done via unanimous decision. One of the judges actually gave it a 30-27, which if you watch that fight, what were you watching? 30-27? It was obviously a 30-25. That was just an ass whooping, man. I thought it was pretty much one-way traffic there in favor of Derek Brunson. Honestly, I thought this was the way that this fight was going to play out. Derek Brunson, coming from the UFC, is an absolute stud there. He's fought the who's in the UFC. He's fought the Israel Adesanyas. He's fought he's fought everybody, right? So that being said, you had to think that he was going to go out there and not only show off, but show out and get it done. And that's exactly what happened, folks. So, that being said, Nano, what were your thoughts on that fight?
Absolutely great intro there, brother. I'll start with Derek Bandicoot, aka Blonde Brunson. And yeah, at 39 years old, man, he was able to turn back the clock father time here and beat him in a sense. It was really interesting to watch. I would say I was surprised. I think the biggest knock on Derek Brunson, and like you mentioned, we've seen a lot of him in the UFC, and what we've seen a lot of when he's lost is that gas tank just, dissipates faster than you can imagine. I mean, it's bad. It's as bad as it gets. We've seen some of the worst performances in the UFC from his lack of a gas tank, or just frankly almost fully shutting down in the octagon. But hey, at 39 years old, maybe just a change of scenery, maybe being a little bit more motivated. And he actually mentioned this in the post fight about making maybe a little bit more money this time around. He was able to dig deep and maintain his cardio and beat a young and talented fighter in Ray Cooper III, aka Brada Boy. At 30 years old, 25-9, similar record, 16 KOs under his belt. So, going into this, you got to imagine, this is a good test for Derek Brunson, a good test for Ray Cooper III, who was able to hang around. He was going up a weight division, though, as well. And Derek Brunson able to use that 7-inch reach, again, that bandit style punching and body morphism is able to get him the win here. So it was a fun one for sure. I laugh at the speed of the strikes here, and Brunson only throwing at a 15 mile an hour striking speed. That's like a little thing they tend to have here on the PFL statistics. Different than UFC, a little unique there. But yeah, overall, great performance by Derek Brunson. Excited to see what's next for him. And this is a big name. And again, this adds validation. This adds main card attraction. This has pay-per-view appeal. This has, ticket sales. Derek Brunson's someone that you're going to want to push. And at 39, I mean, geez, get a bit back in there. I don't know when that new season's going to be, but I'm excited to see him come back on top here. He's been in there, like I said, against the who's who's. And these guys that we're talking about are still top 5 in the world, or at least in the UFC, which you can argue are also in the world. So, hey, I mean, throw him up in there, see what he's got. And again, this will further validate the organization, because if someone beats him, they're going to take all that steam as well. And that's a big feather in the cap. So excited for him.
Definitely excited for him as well. I thought Derek Brunson, that was the best possible debut he could have had in the PFL. And he made it look pretty close to effortless. Someone that also made things look pretty effortless was Kayla Harrison, going in there against Aspen Ladd, former UFC fighter, not necessarily a former UFC title fighter, but she's fought a who's who in her divisions in the UFC. She's missed weight almost as many times as she's fought in the UFC. Was very surprised to see her make weight at PFL. Again, I've got to call a spade here. I've got to talk about the fact that it felt like they were on stage at a sitcom. Whenever she was weighing in, she's all on the scale, like laughing and like smirking as if she knew she was going to make weight, and I don't know, maybe poking fun at herself for missing weight so many times. But either way, it just felt weird. There was something that felt off about it. And then, of course, going into the fight, it kind of felt like a UFC sacrificial lamb. I genuinely tweeted about this a year ago when they first picked up Aspen Ladd. You can check the record, bud. But again, I knew this was going to happen. Kayla Harrison is an absolute beast. Congrats to Larissa Pacheco. She is a testament to the fact that if you run a fight so many times over and over again, you're bound to get a win over somebody that's beaten you twice before or 3 times before. And that's what happened with her and Kayla Harrison last time they fought. I digress. Kayla Harrison versus Aspen Ladd is what we're talking about. We'll talk about young Pacheco later. But man, good Lord. I was looking around at Aspen Ladd throughout that entire fight, and I was looking for offense. Like, where are you? She was on the defensive the entire time, bro.
She's walking back to the corner. I'm so sorry. I cannot swing tonight.
That was good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Yeah, no, I mean, no offense. I mean, Aspen Ladd, definitely what I felt was going to be a big test for Kayla Harrison. At least, hey, someone that was coming from the UFC, has been in there with the who's who. Can she actually make this tough for Kayla? Can she make her uncomfortable? And no, I mean, she just really didn't have an answer. I know the pressure. I know Kayla does have sort of a funky style to her. The way she's jerky and moves around, she's going to eventually try to shoot, and she's crafty when she gets close. So I think you're just so cautious of where she is in the spacing at all times. You have to be, right? If you get in the clinch with her, if she try to trip you, just straight bulldoze you into the ground. I mean, there's a lot of different ways she could come at you. So it's different when you're in there, right? I think you kind of just happen to, unfortunately, see one of those just neutralizing of a fighter where Kayla was just too much, right? Completely shut Aspen Ladd down. And like you mentioned, Larissa Pacheco, someone we'll talk about, an absolute savage. But Kayla Harrison is too. And, at 33 years old, I mean, she's 16-1. I'm curious to see what's next. I mean, she's obviously the poster child here for PFL. Maybe you continue to try to go for the $1 million and get that title back. Maybe you run that back with Larissa Pacheco. Or maybe you look at this Bellator roster. I don't know if she called out Cyborg. I know Cyborg's in talks to maybe fight someone else as well. But there certainly are some names. I mean, Cyborg would be a fun one, regardless of if it's for like a PFL title or not. I mean, I think that fight at any time would attract eyeballs, could put butts in seats, and it's a big legacy fight. At this stage in her career, again, she's 33 years old. Cyborg, geez, I don't know how old she is now. I have to double check here quickly. But again, I mean, it's that would be the fight to make. I don't know what's next for her outside of maybe trying to go to the UFC. But if that's never in the cards, then you almost got to book Cyborg sooner than later. Now that she's 38 years old as well. What are your thoughts there, brother, about Kayla, her performance, or what's next for her in her career at this stage, given her accomplishments?
I definitely think that the only thing that really makes sense for her is a fight against Chris Cyborg. I will say if they want to do like a spectacle fight or a really big money fight, the only other fight other than that makes sense for her, because she's already won the PFL championship like 2-3 times. Larissa Pacheco now apparently has her numbers, so it makes more sense for her to fight on the PFL like big super fight series, right? I say they sign Ronda Rousey for a one fight deal and have Ronda Rousey fight her at 145.
Ooh, bring Ronda back? Is she looking to make a comeback? I remember that was being whispered.
I mean,
she's still only 36. I mean, that'd be interesting.
They're both judokan, like they're judo strong background. So I just think it'd be a really fun matchup. Do I think Ronda has a shot or would win? Not necessarily, but I do think it'd be a very fun matchup.
Do you think they could pay Amanda Nunes enough to come back?
Or
do you think she would not go against UFC? Probably not, huh?
Not a chance. I don't think so.
That's the one that's always, I think we've always wanted, right? Deep down.
I think she beats Amanda Nunes. I think she's a problem for Amanda Nunes.
She's huge, bro. She's huge.
She's a monster, dude. She's an absolute monster of a human being. Speaking of monsters, Impa Kazangane. What an absolute Cinderella story. Fun fact, if you've seen him and you haven't watched the PFL, or you recognize the name, but you don't really know why, it's because he was on the receiving end of probably the knockout of the century against Joaquin Buckley. And you know what I'm talking about, right? Like,
it definitely was the knockout of the century. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like his opponent threw a body kick. He caught the body kick. And then his opponent jumped up and did a spinning back wheel kick from hell, midair, suspended, clipped Impa's head, and sent him to the shadow realm, and packing from the UFC shortly after that. But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to him, because I can tell you right now that Joaquin Buckley, as much as I love him, Numansa is not getting paid $1 million to fight in the UFC. He's lucky if he's getting paid $40K to fight in the UFC right now without that $50K fight of the night bonus or performance bonus. Meanwhile, the guy that was on the receiving end of that knockout of the century, what happened? He went to the freaking PFL and not only entered the actual season, but won the whole damn thing for his division, which means he cashed $1 million check here, folks. The PFL paid off for this young man. He got the win over Josh Silveira in this 5-round title fight, took him to the unanimous decision, 50-45, 50-45, 50-45. Every single judge had it the same exact way, folks. And you absolutely love to see it. Truly. Again, this young man has just, he's the Cinderella story. He has put in absolute work, and for him to go out there and get the unanimous decision like that and get $1 million check like that, it's just, honestly, it's beautiful to see.
It absolutely is, brother. My 2 cents are, he's someone you're on a root for. And like you said, I mean, obviously, as someone that will unfortunately, notoriously, infamously be associated with being on the receiving end of the worst knockout of all time, or maybe the best, depending on who you ask. Tim, it's probably the worst. Tuss, probably one of the best. But yeah, man, Impa since then, I mean, you love to see this from, again, 29 years old. He's 15-3, well-rounded fighter, able to put it all together. And, again, it's a lot of exciting things to come. I think you mentioned it here, and why we're talking about it is that it's a Cinderella story, and I think that you got to sell the story, and PFL can't do any better than pump this guy up, get his story out there for the public. That's why, Francis Ngannou captured the world. That's why Conor McGregor, coming from humble beginnings, although his mouth certainly helps, but the performances and then having a story to tell are all reasons why we're going to tune back in. So congratulations to him. Super excited. I mean, again, 29 years old, sky's the limit. I think he said he might have called out Ngannou, which I don't know if that's going to happen. He was on the Anik Florian show today.
He did call out Ngannou. He said he would go up in weight class. The most he's weighed is like 235, but he said he could get the win over him at 235. Honestly, I think if I'm being real with you here, it sounds to me like a case of a young man just really trying to seal the deal. And, you know, he already won $1 million. If he gets a fight against Francis Ngannou, go to the bank twice because it's a guaranteed $2 million. He negotiated that for his opponents in the PFL deal.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, again, that's huge. I mean, he knows what he's doing there. That's the cash cow and the person you want to call out. But I think if you're in Ngannou, I don't see a benefit there. And I would be surprised if that happens. Might be a failed attempt there, unfortunately, for Impa. But I love the enthusiasm. Love where his head's at.
If you ask me, I would say that Ngannou's scared because we all heard the call out, but Ngannou's been quiet. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm just kidding. Ngannou would probably kill that guy, but I do love the story. I thought it was fantastic. That was a really funny call out. Again, just to me, it seems like someone who's really just trying to secure the bag. Speaking of securing the bag, guys, the next 4 fights we're going to talk about here, rather than the last 5 fights of the conversation, are all title fights. They're all $1 million title fights. That's what PFL does. So Magomed Karimov went in there against Sadib Usai, who is an absolute beast. Sadib Usai is a knockout artist, just long, lanky, very MVP-like with his shot selection and strength. That being said, I knew this fight was going to be a landslide victory for Magomed Karimov. Magomed Karimov is a beast in the grappling sector, and that's exactly what we saw, right? We had 2 10-9 rounds in rounds 1 and 2. And then, of course, in round 3, Sai was trying to stay active with kicks. He was using his length to his advantage. But Magomed Karimov connected with a sharp straight right to the body, rushed in, and caught a defensive side ducking in. Before Sai could counter, Magomed Karimov bit down on a guillotine choke, jumped the guard, and activated his hips. I mean, it was all murder, she wrote, man. Magomed Karimov is a technician on the ground. He's an absolute stud in the grappling realm. And this was, to me, just another night at the office for him. What were your thoughts on that fight, Nano? Did you think that Sadib Usai had a chance in that fight before it started or not?
I think anyone has a puncher's chance, right? I mean, regardless of the odds, regardless of the pedigree, you never know what's going to happen. But you knew about Magomed Karimov. I mean, not only is he a Magomed, that's half the battle. That's already a scary name in and of itself. I do got to admit, though, when I see someone that is as decorated as him, I mean, coming into this fight, 34-6, 13 knockouts, 10 submissions. And since his loss to Ray Cooper in 2021 in the first PFL Championship Series, he's on before this fight, he was on a 5-fight win streak. So going into it, you know, this guy has all the tools in the toolbox. And yeah, really for someone like Sai, he would have had to, I feel, best path to victory at this age is to try to put Magomed out early, not stick around and make it a muddy fight. I mean, not to discredit Sabadou Sai, because he has had an accomplished career. He actually beat Rory McDonald after losing to Magomed back in 2021 in one of the initial PFL 7 playoff series. So this guy has his number. I mean, he's been on a great streak, but at 37 years old, Father Time stays undefeated, and Magomed just had to reconfirm that he has his number here. So anyone has a puncher's chance. You've seen Derek Brunson at 39 years old beat the younger competitor, but Magomed's a tough guy. He's someone that needs to be reckoned with. And again, excited to see what's next. I mean, this guy is a very talented fighter. Was able to just really apply just too much pressure for Sai. And sometimes pressure does lead to creating diamonds, but not in this case. So good fight by Magomed. And for the audio listeners, I'm wearing my Dustin Diamond Poirier shirt. So quick shout out. Let's go.
Dustin Poirier fans here, you already know how it is, or you already know what it is. So, yeah, I mean, Seti Busai, he's a great fighter, but like you said, Magomed Karimov's got his number. He's got him. He's got him pinned down, or at least he did on Saturday, or rather Black Friday. So, moving into the next fight, we had the PFL 2023 Women's Featherweight Championship of the World. And it was between none other than Larissa Pacheco coming in against Marina Mokhnoktina, which is a fun name to say, my goodness. But I digress. That fight was just another decision. Man, we couldn't get away from some of these decisions. It was a very, very low finish rate of a night on the PFL World Championship card. This one did not shy away from that. So what happened in this fight? Well, in the first round, it was a 10-9 Pacheco for sure in my eyes. Pacheco obviously eyeing her second consecutive PFL championship, albeit in a different weight class. Now, she was facing, like I said, Mokhnoktina for the $1 million women's featherweight final. Pacheco is an absolute beast. Fighting out of Brazil, coming in against the Russian. She brought it to her across all fronts of the fight. She ate shots moving in, but that's one of the best things about Pacheco is she's willing to eat these shots and continue moving forward, almost like a Korean zombie-esque fighter. And that's what we saw on full display. Now, in the start of the second round, she stepped to the center of the cage. Her opponent, Mokhnoktina, looked exhausted, understandably so. I mean, she just absorbed a lot of hurt and was forced to work a lot for that first 5 minutes, if we're being honest here. Now, obviously, she was able to complete a takedown, but back on the feet, Pacheco started stalking her again like a wolf stalking its prey. Again, it was not one-way traffic, but it was fairly evident that Pacheco had taken that second round again in my eyes. Moving into the third and fourth rounds, again, it was a lot more of the same, if I'm being honest with you. I think realistically, Mokhnoktina only won maybe one round, and that was the fifth and final round. Now, Pacheco did really well in that round too, but Mokhnoktina did really, really well. She actually secured top position, postured up in full guard, applied a lot of ground and pound, and I mean, she looked pretty solid. And Pacheco, for whatever reason, just kind of conceded position and was willing to stay on the bottom, probably because she knew that she wasn't going to be able to get the knockout, or rather wasn't going to be knocked out by her opponent. She'd already felt her powerful shots, and she already knew that she was probably up 4 rounds. I still hate to see a fighter willing to just concede position like that and take a beating, especially when we know that Pacheco is actually solid on the ground. So curious to hear your thoughts on that fight, but again, fairly dominant performance for the most part from Larissa Pacheco.
Yeah, extremely dominant by Larissa Pacheco, and she's an absolute savage. I mean, I'm going to give her flowers here, but before I do that, I want to give Marina Mokhnoktina oh man, I don't know. I'm not gonna even try it again. But again, very talented girl. She's a very talented Sambo competitor who really her only blemish, and she came from Bellator. I wanted to note that as well. But her only blemish in the PFL was a loss to a Kayla Harrison back in 2022, which most people lose to Kayla Harrison nowadays, unless you're Larissa Pacheco, that is. But since then, she was on a 5-fight win streak. And this is just a tough matchup, right? I mean, Larissa Pacheco, although Marina has had her path to victory and was able to get some success and get her to the ground, making it muddy, threw up some submission attempts. Unfortunately, Larissa's well-rounded game was just too much for her. And this girl, Larissa Pacheco, I mean, I'm surprised we really haven't heard too much about her. I mean, not only did she beat Kayla Harrison, which is a huge deal. I mean, that was, I believe after they announced it, that was one of the biggest upsets in the PFL organization's career or existence. So surprised they don't promote her more. However, this girl's an absolute dog. Okay. Absolute dog. Let me just remind you all, ladies and gentlemen. So Larissa Pacheco, she is 29 years old. She's 23-4 record with 11 KOs and 8 submissions. So that's a 19 out of her 23 wins. She's found a way to finish her opponent. This is a strong woman. I mean, those kind of statistics are Amanda Nunes-esque. This is unreal to see. And need I remind you, Your Honor, that I checked the stats and she fought in Jungle Fight 2013. She knocked out an Irene Aldana. You might recognize that name, ladies and gentlemen. She fought Amanda Nunes for the title not too long ago. She knocked her out. Larissa was 18 years old. 18 years old, she knocked out Irene Aldana. She then went on as a 19-year-old to go and fight Jessica Andrade. I don't know. You heard of her? She lost. It happens. But at 19 years old, you're fighting Jessica Andrade. And then and this was in the UFC. Now you're in the UFC again at 20 years old and you fight a Germaine de Randamie. You get knocked out, unfortunately. You know, it's tough. But boy, oh boy, I mean, the careers that these women have gone on to have, and now you see what Larissa's gone on to do. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, PFL has a star, and they're sitting on it. It's a hidden star. It's covered in cosmic dust here. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? We need to shine this puppy off. We need to show it off to the world. We got solar systems to light up here, and Larissa Pacheco is someone that can do it. I mean, she, again, has had her fights with Kayla Harrison, but she has all the tools, and she's still only 29 years young. I think she's someone that can transfer over. If she's done making millions of dollars in the PFL, I think you come over to the UFC and you come make a real name for yourself, and you really solidify and validate that bridge and start to build that bridge of how you could cross on over and just continue to be dominant. That would really be the next step in her career, I feel, in terms of evolution. But boy, I mean, I just had to make a quick case there. I mean, she's fought those girls at 18, 19, 20 years old before she could even drink. She's in there squaring off against some of the best. Win, lose, or draw. I mean, those are lessons learned. And hey, those lessons are paying off now. So excited to see what's next for Alyssa Pacheco. But she's a savage. Great hands. She's pressure. She has the jiu-jitsu. Man, do you think she should transition over to the UFC? Or do you think she needs to continue to solidify her PFL dominance?
You mean, do I think Larissa Pacheco should transition over to the UFC?
Correct.
Man, I mean, that's a pretty tough question, to be honest with you. I think Larissa Pacheco is an absolute beast of a human being, but I gotta address the elephant in the room here. She's been to the UFC.
True.
She's fought in the UFC twice. She fought Germaine de Randamie and Jessica Andrade, and she lost to both of those women in the UFC. That's why she got cut.
She was 20 years old, though, brother. Look what she's done since then. That's my only argument. It's my only argument.
I 100% agree with you. I was just trying to play for the devil's advocate. I mean,
don't you put that evil on me.
That's the only thing. And she's also in a completely different weight class these days. She's much larger. If you look up the pictures of her at weigh-ins at the UFC back in the day, man, let me tell you, she does not even look like she's in the same weight class as she used to be, son. So, I mean, that being said, guys, like I do think that it wouldn't be crazy to let this woman back in. So I'm not mad at it. I say give her another shot at the UFC. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and move into the next fight here. We got Renan Ferreira coming in against Denis Gustav Nano. Take the lead here.
Let's go. Appreciate you, brother. Leading us off here in the co-main event of the evening, we have two big boys squaring off here in the heavyweight championship. And we don't need to talk about it too long because it was not that long of a fight here, right? In the second round, our boy Renan Ferreira was able to go in and get a TKO victory over the boy Denis Gustav. Gustav was the more decorated fighter here coming into it. However, Renan, I mean, this guy is just a freaking monster. You want to talk about dudes that are just built different. This guy at 6'8", 260. My goodness, this guy's built like an iron giant. And that's exactly how he looked out there, using his 7-inch arm reach, being able to throw a 23-mile-an-hour punch to seal the deal. I mean, I'm curious to hear your breakdown a little bit more fundamentally, but I just had to just announce that this guy Renan, man, this guy, he just looks like an absolute animal out there. And that's somebody that's a little bit more, I think, of Francis Ngannou's speed. That's the kind of guy that should be calling out of Francis Ngannou, not Impa. But what were your thoughts on his performance there in the octagon? last Friday.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. That guy is he's a beast. He's an animal. As you would probably say, he's a dog. You know what I'm saying? Now, I thought that he did a really good job out there. The first round did not go his way, obviously. Denis Gustave did a really good job of implementing his game plan, went out there, did what he needed to do to get the top position. That being said, in the second round, Ferreira greeted that Russian in the middle of the cage and cracked him with a right hand over the top and slammed home another right hand right behind the ear and just knocked Gustave out where he stood. He pounced on top of him with hammer fists and forced the stoppage from the ref, prompting a life-changing $1 million life-changing lump sum of money for the young man. I thought he did a really, really good job out there. I mean, it was two heavyweight folks going out there and just really bringing it to one another. What do you expect when you got almost 500 pounds of man clashing in the middle of a cage? So absolute monster. Like Ferreira's 6'8". If that man cracks you, you got to think he's going to do damage. And that's exactly what we saw happen on Friday night. Now, the fight that I was most excited about and somehow least excited about at the same exact time was, of course, the main event of the evening, guys. I mean, that is a hell of a main event. The only thing that could have made that a better main event or a more main event would be if we had Bruce Buffer standing in the center of the cage announcing.
It's time!
You know what I mean? Olivier Aubin-Mercier, a.k.a. the Canadian gangster, coming in against Clay Collard, a.k.a. Cassius Clay, a.k.a. one of my favorite fighters outside of the UFC, if I'm being completely honest here, folks. He reminds me a lot of Dustin Poirier in his grit, his tenacity, and I mean, honestly, just his old school fight style, right? Like, you could just tell that if he's down in a fight, it's like you're just waiting for tumbleweeds to roll across the center of the octagon because you know it's going to be a freaking gunfight going into that next round. The guy is just always ready to go, always ready to throw. And he's been on the wrong side, in my humble opinion, of arguably some of the worst mixed martial arts decisions that I have ever seen in my entire life, and definitely in my entirety as a UFC fan or MMA fan in general. I can honestly tell you that in his last handful of fights, he should have won those fights that he lost. The fight against Raush Manfio, specifically in the PFL 7 2021 playoffs. Like, he did more than enough to beat Raush Manfio, and he should have gotten the win. But I digress. He didn't. And we've seen it happen time and time again. We're talking about another guy that fought in the UFC. He's fought your Gabriel Benitez's. Oh, by the way, he fought against Max fucking Holloway. Okay, folks? The man is a stud. He's also got some pretty sick tattoos. Love the Mortal Kombat tattoo. Like, love all of his tattoos, to be completely real with you. That being said, this is the reason I was so not excited about this fight, because he's fighting the Canadian gangster, folks. Olivier Aubin-Mercier is just an absolute stud when it comes to grappling. You're talking about someone that helped GSP train. You're talking about someone that trained alongside GSP, getting ready for those Johnny Hendricks fights and things like that. So, I mean, the dude is just an absolute beast. He's an absolute stud, and you know he is going to continue to just have the same cadence and onslaught from start to finish in these fights. Now, looking at what he's able to do against Cassius Clay was definitely impressive. Even as a Cassius Clay fan, the man went out there and, in my opinion, won 3 rounds out of 5. Now, I did think that Collard won round 3 and round 4. I mean, I thought he did enough to win round 3. I know it was a very close round, so that I could understand if you scored for Aubin-Mercier. But round 4, I mean, he was going to the body. Collard was shutting down takedowns, just shoving Olivier Aubin-Mercier away, just like, the fuck back, bro. I'm done with this. Let's fight. It looked good, man. Cassius Clay is an absolute warrior. He's one of the last of a dying breed of in my opinion, not mixed martial artists, but fighters, right? Like he's a real fighter's fighter. He's a blue collar fighter. Just bite down on the mouthpiece and let's throw these hands kind of fighter, man. And you really love to see it. That being said, though, he didn't have the right skill set to get it done over a Canadian gangster and Olivier Aubin-Mercier. And you hate to see it because it's the first time he finally didn't get screwed over by judges and made it to the finale. And just a bad matchup stylistically. What were your thoughts, Nano?
Yeah, it was exactly that. Although a bad matchup stylistically for our boy Cassius Clay, not a bad matchup stylistically for us viewership fans. I mean, my goodness, that was a great performance, great fight. And PFL put on a great main card event here. You love to see it. And yeah, I mean, these are two dogs. These are two old school gangsters that went in there and left it all out there. You want to talk about leaving, all their honor and dignity and respect in there. That's exactly what they did, man. They fought with their shields out. And it seems like Olivier Aubin-Mercier might have hung up the shield after this fight, and he may be retiring. Like you mentioned, man, he's been around since the GSP days, which is crazy to think about. And he was in the UFC for a while. Honestly, he was someone that I was a fan of. He was a familiar face, a familiar name, although he did have a bad 2018 and then ending his 2019 losing to Arman Tsarukyan, who we'll be talking about here on Wednesday. Spoiler. But yeah, I mean, after his departure from the UFC, I was a bit worried, not sure what was going to be next for him. But he landed in the PFL and, man, has made quite a name for himself. And I think, again, because of his success in the UFC, solidifies or helps validate PFL as an organization. This is a champion that is a legitimate dude. Could he go over to the UFC and be a champion as well? I mean, no. The reality is, like, that division, lightweight division, is the most stacked in the world. I mean, there's another guy in the PFL or Bellator now roster in the Usman Nurmagomedov, who is arguably the best lightweight on that roster, who can actually transfer over and I think can be a dog in the UFC as well. But he got popped for PEDs, so not sure what's happening there. That is someone at 25 years old, and I'm now talking about Usman Nurmagomedov. Got a little sidetracked here, but that's someone Let's get back to Olivier. Olivier, great career, though. I think just wanted to solidify the Canadian gangster, made a name for himself in the PFL as well. And I think laid out a good blueprint for making the transition and making it successful, making a name for yourself, making some good money along the way as well, which is always the goal. But yeah, Cassius Clay did not make it easy for him by any means. I mean, the strikes landed, like you said, showing out in those later rounds makes it hard for the judges. But ultimately, I guess OAM, found a way to get it done and edge out the victory here and probably coast off into the sunset. Not sure what you do next year with Clay Collard, but again, I mean, PFL, Bellator, a lot of talented guys on this roster now, and that lightweight division is one we'll always enjoy talking about. But yeah, great performance, great main event, man, for sure.
Stellar main event. I thought the main event definitely delivered on every facet of the word, and I completely agree, man. I think it might be the perfect time for OAM Olivier Aubin-Mercier, the Canadian gangster, to sail off into the sunset and just take that victory in stride, right? It's a perfect time for him to do that because he just won the second $1 million payday of his life in the PFL. Back-to-back PFL season wins, and he wouldn't be able to beat the Islam Makhachevs of the world in the UFC. Let's just call a spade here, folks. But he's damn good, and if he retires, maybe Clay can get one. Let's go. But it was a fantastic main event. Overall, pretty solid card, but again, we gotta call it with no filter here, folks. I'm the one that's been harping and saying for years now that PFL is going to give the UFC a run for their money in the long run, and that they're going to be the ones that end up becoming the next big players in MMA. I just simply don't know if that's going to be the case at this rate. Now, the reason that I say that is because the product isn't perfect, right? There's a lot of lull time between the fights. There's too much hype up videos. Like they need to also hone in things, right? Like the UFC has one product. It's the UFC, or maybe two products if you count like Tough, right? They have the UFC, they have Tough. But that's it. PFL has the PFL Super Fight Series, the PFL Playoffs, the PFL Regular Season, the PFL Championships. And then they also have the PFL, like the non-super fights that's just like the regular series. So like they have 5 separate entities. It's just hard to keep up with. You just need to have the PFL and just let it all be the PFL. So yeah, I mean, it's too much. It's too hard to keep up with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, man. And that is some of my takeaways. I think as I'm, now learning more about PFL, I'll be for the first to say I really was not that well in tune with what they're doing. But in honor of today's episode, and I think just as a fan of MMA, I want to continue to evolve, continue to grow my horizons.
All right,
and
good job, champ.
Why not get a little bit more involved in other events? And if I can make time, and if they're going to be pay-per-views, hey, I'm all for it. But hey, if I'm going to start spending my money, I'm going to get my 2 cents out there as well. And you hit the nail on the head, Olin. Like when it comes to production, I mean, nobody touches the UFC, and they need to try to do as best as they can. Maybe you poach someone from there and back up the brink truck and pay them as much as you need, or you just try to mimic what they're doing. But everything, and they've been doing it for a long time. I mean, they're 30 years in. PFL's been around for maybe 2 or 3. So I guess we got to maybe tamper expectations there. But what sucks, and the reality is, like with Bellator as well, yes, this merger is great, and these mergers do happen over time. But it just, Bellator, although there are opportunities with Showtime and their connections with other networks, I mean, Spike Network, they used to be connected with. Paramount bought them out. Are they going to go on the subscription model? CBS Sports. But Showtime is the big one that if they're going to be the one sponsoring these events, or if they're trying to take a page out of their book, I mean, they are just absolute trash at putting on events as well. I mean,
Showtime's done. Showtime is stepping away from combat sports entirely
because they suck at putting on events.
They suck.
They've sucked forever.
Pacing is the all-time worst.
Pacing. I mean, the going overtime. I think PFL went over 5 hours, which is just like, that's brutal. And all the dead air time. I mean, I'm not even someone that necessarily notices those things, but when there's just flat air time and you're just hearing like the crowd, like music, and there's nothing going on. And even when it is, it's unorganized. I mean,
it's tough.
There was something, I think, on the pay-per-view. I remember, I think Megan Olivey is in the hallway. She's walking, and her entire monologue fits the perfect time it takes from her walking from where the UFC fighters walk to the desk to perfectly ask Joe, John, and DC a question. Like, but if everything just flows so perfectly, really minimal dead time. Obviously, the fights factor in there as well. But production-wise, it needs to be stepped up if we're going to be paying $50 for a pay-per-view event, or if you're going to be trying to sell out arenas. I was listening to some podcasts today where I think they said they sold out. It was a 2,800 person event venue. Was it actually sold out? Probably not. But again, if you can't even fill up a 2,000 person venue, where most UFC pay-per-view events are, like in T-Mobile Arena, I believe that's 16,000, 18,000, somewhere in that range. So, I mean, there's different levels, but hey, I mean, with the production, with things considered, you're paying these fighters $1 million. And maybe that's where it boils down to. I don't want to get too much away from the fighters, because at the end of the day, that's where the money's made, right? You got to put on good fights. The bread has to be in the pudding, but the production has to make sense as well. And some of the dead time, cutting to Jake Paul throughout, it feels random. I think they had Wiz Khalifa on there as well, popping in, where I love Wiz. I'm honestly a huge fan. But I think if you're going to want to do some of this creative stuff to capture a younger audience or to make yourself different, then maybe you do it in a more formal way, like ESPN has like their Manning cast, where Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are on ESPN 2 or ESPN 3. So if you get tired of listening to Joe Buck and Troy Aikman commentate every game, you can actually go and listen to just like a couple of guys, like a fight companion almost. Just watch the fight or watch the event. If they want to have these celebrities or have Jake Paul do it with guests like Wiz or things like that to capture a younger audience or to get more streams or to streamline it, like, I'm all for it. But that needs to be addressed. Like, I mean, first and foremost, like, again, if you're going to start putting these pay-per-view events, and like you said too, like the seasons and all that, although I think that logic makes sense coming from a sport like a football, baseball, like a team sports background, like seasons, championships, tournaments, like brackets, rankings, like I do think all these things make sense. And there is still going to be this buffer time. Like Bellator won't really, I guess, combine until maybe over the next year or two. But how does that look with the rosters? And then these super fights or championship fights, how do you combine these belts? How do you get it formalized? And I think the season thing is as exciting as it is. Like, what's hard with that too, it's like these fighters, man, and injuries, and I always say timing is everything. Like, it's tough to yes, on the shot, brother. It's tough to coordinate that and to expect these fighters to fight 5 times a year. So that's what these guys are doing right now for these seasons. They had to fight 4 or 5 times this last year to win $1 million. That's tough. I mean, injury wise, I mean, I'm gonna get off my high horse here real quick, but curious if you have any additional thoughts or whatever direction you want to go from here, brother, on PFL, on Bellator, on just maybe just what you think are some things you'd like to see. A lot of directions we can go here. And if you're in the chat, listen, I mean, let us know what you want to hear. Let us know your 2 cents. I mean, this is an exciting thing. I mean, again, these mergers happen over time. I actually did have some notes of like other mergers. In 2007, UFC purchased Pride FC. In 2009, Elite XC merged with Strikeforce. In 2010, WEC merged with the UFC. Like, there's a lot of these, right? 2011, UFC purchased Strikeforce. Like, these things happen. I was going to say, the
big ones are the UFC purchases, right? UFC is basically purchasing a lot of these big subsidiaries so that way they can use them as feeder organizations, which has been their model for a long time, which is why they've stayed ahead. If someone starts to do well, they purchase that from them. One of Scott Coker's biggest mistakes, in my opinion, was selling Strikeforce to UFC and then starting up Bellator after that.
Interesting.
How many of those Strikeforce people ended up becoming champions or superstars? Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz, Carlos Condit.
Yeah, those are big
every
names.
single person that became a Bellator superstar fucking came from Strikeforce at some point. So like all of these people were who's and somebody's in Strikeforce. And I mean, this is the situation that we're seeing take place now. Is we could have the who's who of tomorrow fighting in PFL today. And maybe they go and they win $1 million in PFL and then they go fight for scraps at the UFC, but it's because they know that UFC is going to make them a name. But make no mistake, they will leave the PFL in a heartbeat, even for less money, because you need the namesake. And that namesake is what's going to get you paid once you don't want to fight anymore. We're seeing it happen now time and time again, more often than not. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing to seeing these fighters get paid once they're done. But again, at the same time, it doesn't happen unless you have a namesake. Who's commentating for the PFL? Kenny Florian, ex-UFC champion. Randy Couture, ex-UFC champion. And fuck. Gosh, for the life of me, I can't remember the last. Oh wait, he's my favorite one on the booth here. It's Sean O'Connell, the funniest guy from the UFC weigh-ins. Never came close to winning UFC gold, but what did he do? He's on numerous viral videos for being funny at weigh-ins. He made a name for himself so that way he could do something outside of the octagon. He's the funny guy in the PFL commercials. He's also the third man on the mic when you're listening and watching these PFL fights. So. Like the proof's in the pudding, guys. Like, I don't want to be a dick and say like you have to be in the UFC to be somebody, but even the people that don't have to fight to make money in the PFL, where were they? They were in the UFC. They did that.
That's facts. That's facts, brother. That's a good call. And I think that's kind of where they need to maybe position themselves of trying to get more of these older guys or guys that get into these negotiation talks. You keep poaching some of them, and they've done it in the past, but it does. What do you think about the crossover? Like, do you feel like, because like you mentioned, a Strikeforce or even Bellator? I mean, Bellator, Michael Chandler came from there.
The crossover is the way to go. The crossover, like pulling people from Bellator into PFL is the way to go. Not doing PFL versus Bellator, because then you water down the PFL product with something that's not going to exist in tomorrow's years, right? Like, what if you go 4-1 out of 5 against Bellator champions, against your PFL champions? Well, now Bellator's better. and you could have just brought those guys over and built them up in PFL.
That's so true. Yeah, then we're Bellator, and then now it's yep, facts.
You got to play it smart. You got to play it like very, very close tuned, so that way you can make changes on the fly with these types of things. But I think the biggest play and the best play is definitely going to be to bring in those Bellator folks, have them make a name for themselves under the PFL banner, because continuing with more Bellator cards like the plan is right now, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And if you want to continue to be different, I don't know, maybe take it a step further with the seasons thing, right? Like you want to have a season format, right? Why don't we do MMA teams? Why don't we have a Rampage Jackson be a coach of an MMA team? And there's like 3 teams, or like let's say there's like 5 teams per weight class. So there's like 5 teams of lightweights, 5 teams of heavyweights, 5 teams of welterweights. And then they have an accumulation of points, and then those guys split the prize pot at the end of the season. And then you have a team season winner rather than one season winner for the weight class. So like Team Rampage wins the season. Team Evans wins the season. Like, I don't know. I think that'd be a lot of fun. We'd have to like workshop some stuff, obviously, but fuck, I think it'd be a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun,
It's time.
let's go, brother.
Salud, brother.
Cheers to the listeners. Cheers to another episode.
If you're in this deep, pour yourself something, or take a hydration shot, or do whatever you do best.
Do whatever you do, baby. Do whatever you love doing. And
Absolutely.
Also give yourself a pat on the back for sticking it out with us. We love having you guys here, and we appreciate every single one of you. Now, moving into the next topic here, Bellator, PFL, all of these things, they're all fantastic, right? Man, we have a hell of a fight card coming up on Saturday. We're going to break that entire card down on Wednesday, obviously. But man, is there any fights that stand out to you that you're most excited about, obviously, other than the main event?
There honestly are. Let me quickly pull up the prelims as well, because there was
don't pick
one.
the co-main event either, since I think Jalen Turner's off of that still, correct? No, just kidding. Sorry, that was Dan Hooker that's off. Jalen Turner replaced him.
Yes. Jalen Turner is stepping in to fight Bobby Green on short notice. Absolute dog.
That's a fun one.
There are, man. Yeah, honestly, so, I mean, someone I'm excited to see again is the prelim main event is Miesha Tate getting back in there against Julia Avila. But on the main card, I mean, dude, I think, to be honest, the one I'm super excited about is Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. That's going to be a freaking barn burner, bro. That's my main event card right there. That's the one I'm going to need to make sure I'm in front of the TV dialed in for. What about you, brother?
To be honest with you, I'm going to be here for all of them. You know that. But it's not very often where like I'm super stoked about the very first prelim of the day. And this is one of those nights where I am. I actually really, really like Veronica Macedo, a.k.a.
I love that.
Veronica Hardy. And I mean, she went out there and she tore apart Veronica Killer Miller in her last outing. And, I'm a Veronica Killer Miller fan. She trains out here in San Diego. Big fan. Shout out. And I thought Veronica Hardy went out there and just did her dirty, man. She massacred that poor girl. So I want to see if she got lucky because of who she was going with and the fact that Killer Miller has a striking deficit against her. Or is all that training that she's been doing with her husband, Dan Hardy, the outlaw, the kid, hasn't really been paying off like that, paying off dividends. You know what I mean? So I think Veronica Macedo, aka Veronica Hardy, coming in against Jamie Lynn Horth should be a really, really fun fight. Jamie Lynn Horth is undefeated. And I mean, honestly, just running up the whole freaking prelims. Jared Gooden coming in against Wellington Turman. Those two guys are just going to move forward until one of them goes to sleep. Rodolfo Bellato coming in against Ihor Poteria. You might know him as the guy who did the weird dance after he knocked out a legend. Yep, that'll be a fun one. Steve Garcia. That guy's just scrappy as all hell, and he's coming in against the only guy I know that's just as scrappy as him in that division, Melquizel Costa. Fucking just beast. Joe Selecki is on this card. Emiliano, what year is it right now?
That's a throwback. Come on.
I'm telling you, bro, it feels like it. So, I mean, there's just a lot to love. And by the way, Joe Selecki's fighting fucking Drakkar Close. What a banger. Zachary Reese, undefeated up and comer, coming in against Cody Brundage, who I don't know if he knows the definition or how to say the word no when it comes to signing that dotted line. Clay Guida comes back.
Guida, my goodness, 38 and 20
hair.
record. Oh yeah, both Clay Guida. Oh man,
dude.
Oh no, that's sad.
I mean,
that's sad to see.
He doesn't have the long hair anymore, so it's an odd look for sure. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what he does out here against Joaquin Silva. Joaquin Silva is no joke.
No, he's a beast. And then Rob Font, man. I don't know if you already mentioned that, but
and Davey.
Figgy, bro. We haven't seen Figgy in a while, brother. I'm excited to see him in this new division. See how he does.
I think Figgy's gonna get smoked.
Oh,
I think he's gonna get lit the hell up. But we're gonna break that entire fight down. You're not gonna like my breakdown on that one, I don't think.
Can't wait, brother. Can't wait.
Yeah, we're gonna break that one down. We're gonna break that one down for sure. So we will definitely be breaking down. We're gonna talk about it. So with that being said, that's next week's episode. After that episode, obviously, we're gonna break that down, our reactions, and then jump into Song versus Gutierrez, and then UFC 296, and then I believe, as usual, UFC 296 is going to wrap up the UFC events for the year. They will have hit their UFC quota or event quota for the ESPN allotment that they have. So what does that mean for the MMAnomaly Show No Filter? It doesn't mean that we sleep. It doesn't mean that we take those following weeks off. It means that we find other topics in combat sports to go over. And one of my favorite episodes of the entire year, one of my favorite things to do in the entire year is to have you guys that follow me on here and Instagram and Twitter and everywhere you follow me, basically go to my Twitter so that way you can vote on polls. And I'm going to set up a bunch of different topics, a bunch of different options. And me and Nano here, super stoked to have a co-host for this one this time around. We are going to do a MMAnomaly presents the MMAnomaly 2023 MMA Awards. So we'll have your normal topics or normal categories like best male fighter of the year, best female fighter of the year, best knockout of the year, best breakout fighter or breakthrough fighter of the year. And then of course we'll have, your more obscure topics, which please in the chat throughout the coming few weeks, if you have a category that you think would be a fun one, drop it in the chat below. I'll throw a poll up on Twitter for it. And if you have nominations for that actual category that you have, throw those in the chat too. We'll throw them in there. So, things that I'm talking about here, some examples like UFC or MMA fighter most likely to rob a bank. MMA fighter that you would most like to have a drink with. Again, these possibilities are limitless.
Yeah, give me anything.
If Ben the Bane Davis is down to submit another submission of his answers for each topic, that'd be awesome. I know last time he threw out Billy Quarantillo as the weakest fighter on the MMA roster. Because they're homies.
Yes.
It was like an inside joke. But anyways, I digress. Would love to have all of you guys participate. The more the merrier when it comes to that. Honestly, one of my favorite episodes. The earlier we can start getting those polls going, the earlier we can get those topics and rather categories going, the better. Obviously, if there are some crazy things going on December 16th, those will instantaneously be added to the list because recency bias. Am I right, people? Super stoked about it. Look out for those. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. It is at MMAnomaly. You can see it below right here. And make sure you're also following Jive Turkey Talk as well. Those polls, you'll be able to find them on both of our pages because he will be retweeting them as co-host. That is one of the co-host duties. And you can damn sure bet that he is on top of those co-host duties. So that's it, folks. We appreciate you dropping in. We appreciate you stopping in. And more importantly, we appreciate you staying in. So we hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. We hope you had just as good of a Black Friday. If you don't celebrate either of those two things, we hope you had a fantastic Thursday and Friday off, hopefully. And we also hope you have a happy Chris Mahana Kwanzaa in the upcoming month or whatever it is that you celebrate, if we missed any of them, and that weird combination of the words.
That was a good one.
You want to say to the people?
I love that. Yeah, no, great episode. Appreciate y'all. And end of the year, MMAnomaly Award Show. So bring them in, flood our inbox with what you want to hear. And I'm excited to get down. I think I'm going to dress up. I'm going to pull out all the stops here. So little spoiler event and see y'all Wednesday. Let's go. Make it a great week.
Oh, baby. Happy Chris Mahana Kwanzaa to you and your fam. And we will see you in just a couple days.
You've been listening to the MMAnomaly Show. No filter. As you may have been able to tell, we dig the MMA, and our passion is to dive deep into the upcoming fights, give you our expert breakdowns, and help you make sense of all the chaos that is the fight game. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, make sure to find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch at MMAnomaly. Be cool, and we'll see you next time.